Hey guys, in this month's Historical Fiction 101, I'm going to be talking about Season 1 of The Irregulars. So before I do head into my thoughts and feelings on Season 1 of The Irregulars, just a quick disclaimer, I don't plan on having any sort of spoilers in this video, so continue to watch if you want. But yeah, if you have seen the show and you are dying to talk about spoilers, please by all means talk about some spoilers down in the comments with me down below, because I would definitely love to talk about some of the big twists and turns that went on in this series. So yeah, The Irregulars just recently aired not too long ago on Netflix. And the show, what you need to know about The Irregulars is it does take place in the universe of Sherlock Holmes, you know, written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and whatnot, based off of the books and the stories. So we take place in the world of Sherlock Holmes, which traditionally is always, you know, Victorian-based London, if you will. You know, some adaptations will kind of change that, or they'll put it in a modern-day setting or whatever. But yeah, this adaptation definitely keeps it where, you know, it originated from, which is Victorian London. And what the basic premise of the show is, we're following a group of young people. They're all like teenagers, you know, turning into young adults essentially. They're kind of like the street urchins, if you will, of London, England. You know, they're poor, they're living in poverty, they just kind of live day by day with whatever little bit of money they kind of get, any little odd jobs they get. And the thing is, what's going on in Victorian London as we're opening this series? There's a bunch of like supernatural things happening, mysterious things, supernatural things, magical things, things that cannot be explained by the citizens and people of London, if you will. So our group of youngsters, our group of teenagers, they are eventually recruited by none other than John Watson, you guys. They are recruited by him because, you know, if you've read the Sherlock Holmes stories, or if you've watched all the numerous adaptations, you know, everything, you know, when Sherlock and Watson are usually investigating, it's usually something that's easily explainable, and sometimes if it does have a supernatural slant to it, it turns out by the end of the investigation, oh, it's not really anything supernatural. But this show, the things that are happening, they are downright supernatural in nature. Sometimes it's like, okay, what's going on here? What's the reasonable explanation? But yeah, everything is very magical and supernatural in based. That's what you definitely need to know. There's like nothing like absolutely logical or rational. You know what I mean? So yeah, Watson, he needs these young people to help him investigate these strange happenings. And yeah, once again, if you've read the original stories by Arthur Conan Doyle, from what I remember, the Irregulars are typically younger people that Sherlock and Watson use because they need, you know, they can't get into certain places. You know, sometimes they need to hire someone, hey, you can sneak in there and be a spy better than we can. So that's kind of, it's like this show's almost like the origin story of how the Irregulars come into being, if you will. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much this entire show, you guys. It's Sherlock Holmes meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's kind of the easiest way to describe it, and I've seen a lot of other people who have reviewed this show. That's pretty much how they word it. It's Sherlock Holmes meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then a lot of people have been like, oh, and meets Stranger Things. So I personally really liked this show, you guys. Is it perfect? No, it's definitely not a perfect show. It does have its little fair share of flaws in there, because I think the show can sometimes feel a little bit generic on occasion, and it's very much monster of the week, if you will, which is kind of strange because this is a show on Netflix, and you know, when you think of Netflix, you think of binging a show, and that's kind of the weird thing about this show. It's almost kind of not really made for binging. Almost the structure of it does feel more like a week by week basis, if you will. If it was on something like ABC or the CW, I think the CW would probably be a great place where this would probably typically go if it wasn't on Netflix. So that, I think that is kind of one of the things about this show, that it is almost kind of generic in some ways. It does have that monster of the week kind of flow and feel to it. But is it bingeable? I think it is definitely bingeable, because whenever I watch shows on Netflix, I always watch 2 episodes at a time, and I'll kind of go through it every day until I get a whole show done, you know? So it's still very much bingeable, because every episode does kind of end in such a way that leaves you hanging and leaves you wanting more to kind of continue into the rest of the show, because even though the show is very monster of the week sort of, there is like a running story, you know, there is a running thread, a running story that does that keeps all of the characters and the narrative, you know, it keeps it all together, you know, to build up to essentially the final 2 episodes of the season, if you will. So yeah, I personally really liked this show. I found it really fun and entertaining, and you know, by the time I got to the final episode, it's only 8 episodes, you guys. By the time I got to the final episode, I found myself really in love with the characters, which is important, because you know, at the start of episode 1, I was like, okay, I don't know how I'm gonna feel about all of these people, you know, by the time I get through all these 8 episodes, am I going to emotionally connect with them all? And I think I did, for the most part. I think every character, they get their moments to shine and be the hero and to really do things. And I think what was also really good about the show, since it is on a network or a streaming service like Netflix, it definitely got itself a pretty good budget, I think. I think for the most part, all of the special effects were very well done. And the thing is, that's the big important thing about this show you need to know. This show is not relying on the special effects to tell its story, you know, since it is very supernatural and magical based and whatnot. The thing is, it's still not relying on that, you know, it's not relying on all the flashiness and the special effects. It definitely uses a lot of practical effects, especially like practical makeup effects and whatnot, you know, some of the creatures and monsters. And I mean, yeah, really, you kind of get some of the bigger special effects stuff in the final couple episodes, you know, once you kind of get the big reveal about what's kind of going on and what's tying all of these mysterious things together, you know. So yeah, I really like that about the show, that it used practical effects when it needed to. It used practical makeup effects and whatnot. I guess getting into some of the historical, since I'm including this as part of my Historical Fiction 101 series, I guess to get into some of the historical aspects of this show, like I said, it does take place in Victorian London. I think just the overall look and design of this world, it definitely felt like Victorian London to me. You know, I've seen massive tons of amounts of things that take place in Victorian London, you know. I've seen the TV show Victoria, obviously. I've seen things like Ripper Street. Yeah, I've seen a lot of stuff that takes place in Victorian London, and yeah, this definitely follows that very similar flair and look that you traditionally see, you know, kind of that rawness, that grittiness, but where it kind of does throw in a bit of like light and color and flashiness is definitely through the costuming, I think, you know, to kind of balance out that dreariness and drabness of Victorian London. The clothing is definitely kind of a little flashy, I feel like, which definitely makes it not historically accurate, definitely. The costuming is far and away definitely the most inaccurate thing about this show, I feel like. But I still like the clothing, you know, because even though it does have a bit of a modern flair to it at times, thing is, it's like it still has that feel like you still recognize, hey, I'm in Victorian London, you know what I mean? So yeah, I did. The overall look, the style of the show looks great. I liked the clothing, as inaccurate as the clothing was. It's like I still really like the costuming, and you know, the costuming really reflected these characters, you know, the certain types of colors they would all wear, how they would wear their hair, their makeup, or whatever. And then another big aspect of this show, because since it is very supernatural based, because a lot of times when I think about Victorian London, I definitely think of the hype, you know, the fad that was going on during this time period, which was spiritualism, you know, people using the little spirit boards and whatnot. There's definitely a few episodes in here that deal heavily with spirit boards and how that ties into stuff, you know, people who are grieving, they've lost loved ones, and people resorting to spiritualism to try and bring back their loved ones or talk with their loved ones or whatever. So that's actually a big part of the show, which I liked, because that is accurate to the time period, because, you know, using spirit boards and trying to communicate with the dead and whatnot, it was a big fad during the time period. So I liked how that was incorporated in various different episodes throughout the season. And then another historical aspect to this show, we have a character in the show. His name is Prince Leopold, and when he was first introduced and they kept referring to him as Your Majesty and this and that, I was kind of like, okay, this is Victorian London, this definitely has to be one of the numerous children of Queen Victoria, but you know, I don't have all of her children memorized in my mind. So I did do a quick Wikipedia search about Prince Leopold, and yeah, he was in fact the youngest son of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, and he did factually, historically have the blood condition hemophilia. So yeah, the character in the show, he goes by Leo. He's still the son of the Queen, but he's getting aggravated and tired and bored, you know, being cooped up and locked up in the palace, and he wants fun and adventure. He's tired of being coddled, essentially, because of his blood condition, hemophilia. Because if you know anything about hemophilia, it wasn't fun back in the day. One little cut, you're gonna die, you're out. So he has to kind of deal with that. And yeah, the poor Prince Leo, when I was doing more research about him, because I was just kind of curious, because I've never really learned anything about him, I was sad to discover that eventually Prince Leopold, he historically does die by the time he's 30. He has like an accident and he dies because of his hemophilia. So yeah, I kind of had that in the back of my head while I was watching the show. I was like, oh, this poor boy, he's going to eventually die. But yeah, in the context of the show, they have Prince Leopold, you know, he's a teenager at this point. So yeah, he has quite a number of years to go before he historically dies, you know, so I don't know if the show's ever going to reach that part. So that was a historical aspect that I liked that was incorporated into the show, using one of the youngest sons of Queen Victoria who had the hemophilia, and really using that character in specific ways and situations and whatnot. I seriously really love the Prince Leopold character, you guys, because he was just really fun and different, and yeah, you don't really see Queen Victoria's children used all that often and stuff like this. So that was a really cool historical thing that I like that was incorporated. I definitely need to touch on Sherlock and Watson, you guys, because I've definitely mentioned that, you know, this is based in the world of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, so I definitely need to touch on Sherlock and Watson and the interpretation of them in this show. You are primarily with John Watson in this show, because you're introduced to him first before you're even introduced to Sherlock. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that Sherlock does make an appearance, because the way the show is for the first half of the season, they kind of tease you like, okay, is Sherlock going to make an appearance or not? But he does eventually make an appearance. I won't say why or how or whatever, but you do get Watson and Sherlock together at some point during the show in some quite pivotal emotional moments. I really loved the characterization of Sherlock and Watson in this show. The two actors, they really made these truly iconic characters their own. You know, we have seen so many adaptations of Sherlock and Watson over the years. So you know, you always watch these adaptations and it's like, okay, how are they going to make these characters different and unique from all the other millions of actors we've seen in these roles? And I think the two actors doing John and Watson, they really do make these characters their own, and they make them unique in their own special way. And the Sherlock and Watson in this show are definitely just probably the most tortured we've ever seen these characters, you guys, and I kind of love that. And yeah, they both have their own inner demons and their struggles and their tragic backstories and whatnot. So I really truly loved the versions of Sherlock and Watson in this, because there was something a little refreshing about them, you know, compared to like Martin Freeman and Benedict Cumberbatch and Jude Law and Robert Downey Jr. and even Lucy Liu and Johnny Lee Miller, you know. So I really liked that. And yeah, besides Sherlock and Watson, Mycroft makes an appearance, Lestrade, Inspector Gregson, Mrs. Hudson, you know, you get all those characters that eventually pop up. So yeah, you get all that in. If you're here for, you know, that Sherlock Holmes canon in a sense, a lot of those iconic characters do make their appearances throughout the season in nice little special ways. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed this show. Like I said, it was fun and entertaining. You know, by the time all 8 episodes were done, I fell in love with the characters, you know, on an emotional level, which is good. Like I mentioned, it's not totally perfect because it does kind of have that rather generic formulaic pattern to it in some ways. But I liked the various different stories going on, whether that was the character stories or the plot stories. And it was just really fun, you guys. Just overall really fun, and I'm hoping it does get renewed for a second season. I liked it that much, you know, that yeah, if it had a second season, sign me up. I'm definitely going to watch it. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on the Irregulars. I definitely have a lot of thoughts about some more spoilery topics, but I can't really get into that. Seriously, there was some really clever twists and turns, and it's like, oh my god, how would this be incorporated into a second season, you know? I have questions after this season, okay? But either way, love this show. I'm definitely curious your thoughts. Did you guys watch this show? Do you plan on watching it? Just let me know. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.